The Big Sky County Fair arrived in Montana like it did every August, bringing with it the smell of funnel cakes, the crack of rifles at the shooting gallery, and the thunder of hooves against dirt. For 15-year-old Clara Miller, it meant one thing: the rodeo. She sat in the bleachers between her parents, her father John's weathered hands resting on his knees, her mother Mary clutching a lemonade that had long since gone warm. Below them, cowboys in starched shirts and silver buckles rode broncs that twisted like corkscrews, their bodies snapping with each violent buck. The crowd roared with every successful 8-second ride, and groaned when a rider ate dirt. But Clara's attention wasn't on the main arena. Her gaze kept drifting to the holding pens behind the chutes, where the stock contractors kept the horses between events. She could see them from her seat: the outline of wooden rails, the occasional flash of a horse's flank, the dust rising in angry clouds. "I'm going to get some air," she told her mother, sliding past her father's knees. John Miller barely glanced up. "Don't wander too far. Bareback bronc riding's up next." Clara nodded, but she was already moving down the concrete steps, her boots finding purchase on the sun-bleached cement. She wound her way through clusters of families, past the beer garden where ranch hands told lies about the size of their herds, and toward the back gate where only personnel were supposed to go. A security guard stood by the entrance, but he was deep in conversation with a barrel racer, his eyes tracking her sequin shirt rather than the slip of a teenage girl ducking under the rail. Clara had been coming to this rodeo since she could walk. She knew every blind spot. The holding area was a maze of temporary corrals, each one holding horses in various states of agitation. Some stood quiet, resigned to their lot. Others paced, their eyes rolling white. Clara moved slowly among them, keeping her body language soft, her breathing steady. This was where she felt most at home, not in the screaming chaos of the arena, but here, in the quiet tension between horse and human. Then she heard it, a sound like a freight train derailing. The crash of metal against wood, the shriek of terrified workers, the guttural scream of an animal pushed beyond its limits. Clara ran toward the sound. At the far end of the complex, a crowd had gathered around a reinforced pen. The corral was built with railroad ties instead of regular rails, the kind they used for the truly dangerous stock. Inside, a black stallion was destroying everything in reach. His hooves struck the wood with enough force to splinter the ancient timber. Foam dripped from his muzzle. His eyes were wild, not with malice, but with something Clara recognized immediately: terror. "That's Midnight," said a voice beside her. She turned to see one of the older stock handlers, a man named Rick with a face like cracked leather. "Meanest son of a bitch we've got. Nobody's ever made it to 6 seconds on him. Last cowboy who tried ended up with 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung." "Why is he so upset?" Clara asked, watching the horse's muscles bunch and release with each violent movement. Rick shrugged. "Born mean, I guess. Some horses are just bad seed. We keep him around because the crowd loves to see cowboys get thrown. Good for ticket sales." Clara's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She moved closer to the pen, ignoring Rick's warning to stay back. The stallion was magnificent, 17 hands of pure muscle and rage, his coat so dark it seemed to absorb light. But when Clara looked past the violence, she saw what others missed. The way his ears pinned not in aggression but in fear. The white foam around his mouth that spoke of stress, not savagery. The way he kept his hindquarters to the corner, protecting his most vulnerable parts. This wasn't a killer. This was a survivor. A man in a contractor's vest appeared, carrying an electric cattle prod. "All right, let's move him to the bucking chute. Show's starting in 10 minutes. "You're not using that on him," Clara said, her voice carrying more authority than her 15 years should have allowed. The contractor stopped, noticing her for the first time. "Little girl, this ain't the petting zoo. Get back to the stands before you get hurt." "I said you're not using that on him." John Miller's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Clara, now." She turned to find her father standing behind her, his face set in the stern expression she knew meant trouble. But Clara didn't move. Instead, she looked back at the horse, at Midnight, who had stopped his rampage and was watching her with intelligent, terrified eyes. "Dad, look at him. Really look. He's not mean. He's scared. He's 1,000 pounds of attitude with hooves," John said, his voice gentling slightly. "And that makes him dangerous whether he means to be or not. Come on. The contractor didn't wait for the family drama to resolve. He pressed the button on the prod, making it crackle with electricity, and approached the gate. Clara made her decision in a heartbeat. She vaulted over the lower rail and dropped into the pen with Midnight. The world seemed to freeze. Her father shouted. Her mother's scream carried from somewhere in the distance. She must have followed them. The contractor stumbled backward. Rick started yelling for someone to get the medical kit ready. But Clara heard none of it. All her focus narrowed to the horse in front of her. Midnight reared, his hooves pawing the air inches from her head. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't raise her hands or make herself big like you were supposed to do with an aggressive animal. Instead, she made herself small. She lowered her eyes, turned her shoulders slightly away, and simply breathed. In through her nose, out through her mouth. Slow, steady. The way she'd taught herself by watching wild horses in the backcountry. The way she'd practiced with every difficult horse she'd ever encountered on her father's ranch. Midnight landed, snorting, his sides heaving. He pawed the ground, sending up a spray of dirt. Clara didn't move. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. The stallion's ears swiveled forward, just slightly. Clara caught the movement and took a single step to the side, still not looking directly at him. In horse language, direct eye contact was a challenge. She was showing him she wasn't there to fight. Another breath. Another small step, this time at an angle that gave him space to move away if he wanted. She was offering him a choice, something she suspected he hadn't been given in a long time. Midnight's nostril flared as he processed her scent. No fierce sweat. No aggression. Just a girl who smelled like hay and saddle soap and the sweet grain she'd been feeding her own horse that morning. Minutes passed, though to Clara it felt like seconds. The crowd around the pen had grown silent, holding their collective breath. Someone in the distance was recording on their phone, but Clara was aware of nothing except the magnetic pull between her and this broken, beautiful animal. She took another step, then another, until she was close enough that the stallion's breath stirred her hair. She still didn't look at him directly. Instead, she extended her hand slowly, palm down, fingers relaxed, and waited. Midnight's muzzle stretched toward her hand, nostrils working. He huffed once, a sound halfway between a snort and a sigh. And then, impossibly, he lowered his head and pressed his soft nose against her palm. The crowd erupted. Clara barely heard them. She was running her hand up the horse's face, feeling the tension in his muscles begin to dissolve. She whispered to him, words that had no meaning beyond their tone. Soft, gentle, safe. Easy, boy. Nobody's going to hurt you. Not anymore. I've got you. Her father appeared at the rail, his face pale. Clara, very, very slowly, you need to come out of there. He's okay, Dad. He's okay now. Honey, please. Clara gave Midnight one last stroke along his neck, then backed away using the same slow, deliberate movements. The stallion didn't follow, but he didn't retreat either. He simply stood there, watching her with eyes that held something new. Curiosity. She climbed out of the pen to find her mother crying and her father looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The contractor was shouting something about liability and insurance, but Rick was shaking his head in wonder. In 30 years, the old handler said, I've never seen anything like that. A young woman with a phone stepped forward. I got it all on video. This is going to blow up on TikTok. Clara didn't understand what that meant. She was still watching Midnight through the rails, and he was still watching her. By the time the Millers made it home to their ranch 20 miles outside of town, Clara's phone, a hand-me-down from her mother that she mostly used to text friends about 4-H meetings, had 847 notifications. The video had been posted with the caption, Montana horse whisperer tames killer stallion with just her presence face screaming in fear horse face, hashtag, horsegirl, hashtag Montana, hashtag rodeo, hashtag unbelievable. Mary sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the comments on her own phone, her face cycling through amazement, pride, and worry. John stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out at their own horses grazing in the twilight. 2 million views, Mary said quietly. In 4 hours. Clara felt sick. She'd gone to check on their ranch horses, 3/4 horses, and an aging Appaloosa her father had retired from ranch work, trying to find some normalcy. But even the familiar routine of checking water troughs and hay nets couldn't settle the churning in her stomach. People are saying it's fake, she said, reading over her mother's shoulder. They think it was staged. That Midnight was drugged, or that I knew him before, or that it's all special effects. Some people can't recognize something real when they see it, Mary said, squeezing her daughter's hand. John finally turned from the window. It was foolish, Clara. I know you meant well, but that horse could have killed you. But he didn't. That's not the point. You put yourself in danger without thinking. I was thinking. Clara's voice rose, surprising herself. I was thinking about what he needed, not what was convenient for everyone else. That's what nobody gets. He's not a killer. He's just a horse that nobody's bothered to understand. The silence that followed was broken by the buzz of Clara's phone. Then another. Then another. The notifications were coming in faster than the old device could handle. Mary scrolled through the new influx. Clara, there's a message here from someone named Dr. Helen Moore. She says she's an equine behaviorist in Colorado, and she wants to talk to you. Clara took the phone, her hands shaking slightly as she read. Dear Clara, I saw the video of your interaction with the stallion called Midnight. What you did was remarkable, but also dangerous without proper training. I run a natural horsemanship and rehabilitation center in Colorado. If you're interested in learning to do what you did today, but safely and with scientific understanding, I'd like to invite you to visit my facility. You have a gift. Let me help you refine it. Best, Dr. Helen Moore. John moved to read over her shoulder. Colorado's a long way. It's a summer program, Clara said, clicking through to Dr. Moore's website. The photos showed a beautiful facility nestled in the Rockies, with spacious paddocks and horses in various stages of rehabilitation. It's only a month. And Dad, it's everything I've been trying to teach myself from library books and YouTube videos. She works with trauma cases, horses that have been abused or abandoned. Like Midnight, Mary said softly. We can't afford it, John said, but there was less conviction in his voice than before. Summer programs like that run thousands of dollars. Clara's phone buzzed again. This time it was Dr. Moore again. I should mention, if finances are a concern, I'd be willing to offer you a scholarship. Your tuition would be covered in exchange for helping with the rescue horses. You'd earn your education. Mary and Clara looked at John. The rancher ran a hand through his graying hair, his jaw working as he wrestled with the decision. Let me think about it, he finally said. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, watching the view counter on the video tick upward. 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. The comments section was a war zone. For every person calling her amazing or talented, there were 2 more calling her reckless, stupid, or accusing her of faking the whole thing. But buried in the negativity were messages from people who understood. Trainers from across the country sharing their own experiences with traumatized horses. Veterinarians explaining the science behind what she'd done. And dozens upon dozens of young girls saying she'd inspired them. One comment stood out. I've worked with horses for 40 years, and I've never seen anyone read an animal's fear signals that clearly. This girl is the real deal. She needs proper training before someone who doesn't know what they're doing tries to copy this and gets hurt. Please, someone, make sure she gets the education she deserves. Clara screenshot the comment and sent it to her father. His response came 20 minutes later. Called Dr. Moore in the morning. The Rocky Mountain Equine Rescue and Rehabilitation Center sat in a valley between 2 peaks, the morning sun turning the grass to gold and the horses to living statues. Clara stood at the entrance with her duffel bag, feeling simultaneously excited and terrified. Dr. Helen Moore was not what Clara had expected. Instead of the gray-haired grandmother she'd imagined, Helen was maybe 45, with sun-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the lean build of someone who spent their days working with animals. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp but kind. You must be Clara. Welcome. How was the drive? Long, Clara admitted. Her father had driven her down, a 9-hour journey that had been mostly silent. John Miller wasn't good with emotions, but the way he'd squeezed her shoulder before driving away had said everything he couldn't put into words. Helen gave her a knowing smile. Come on, let me show you around, and then we'll get you settled into the cabin. You're sharing with 2 other students, Emma and Kai. They're both 17 and have been here a week already. The facility was even more impressive in person. 25 acres of paddocks, each carefully designed with the horse's psychological needs in mind. No square corners where a horse could feel trapped. Shelters that faced away from prevailing winds. Water sources placed strategically to encourage natural movement patterns. We have 15 horses right now, Helen explained as they walked. All of them are cases that traditional training methods failed. Some were abused. Some were neglected. A few are wild Mustangs from BLM holding facilities who were deemed too dangerous to adopt. Our job is to help them learn to trust again. They stopped at a paddock where a gray mare stood motionless in the far corner, her head low, eyes dull. This is Silver. She was a barrel racing horse who got injured and was sold to a man who thought he could make her a breeding mare. When she wouldn't breed, he beat her. She was seized by animal control 3 months ago. She hasn't let anyone touch her since she arrived here 2 weeks ago. Clara studied the mare, noting the telltale signs. Ears that swiveled constantly, tracking threats. Weight shifted to her hind legs, ready to flee. The way she kept the fence at her back, limiting the angles from which danger could approach. What have you tried? Clara asked. The basics. Spending time in the paddock, letting her approach on her own terms, offering food rewards. She'll eat if we leave the bucket and walk away, but the moment anyone gets within 10 feet, she bolts to the other corner. Clara nodded slowly, an idea forming. Can I try something? That's why you're here. But Clara, I want you to tell me what you're thinking first. That's the difference between instinct and education. Understanding why you do what you do. This was new. In Montana, when Clara worked with horses, she just did it. She'd never had to explain her process before. She's hypervigilant, Clara said slowly, working through her thoughts. She's constantly scanning for threats, which means her nervous system is stuck in fight or flight mode. Being approached directly makes her feel trapped, because in her experience, humans moving toward her means pain. Good. So what's your strategy? Don't approach her. In fact, don't look at her at all. Go into the paddock and do something completely unthreatening and predictable. Something rhythmic and boring. Helen's smile widened. Show me. Clara grabbed a manure fork from the supply shed and entered Silver's paddock. The mare immediately tensed, shifting her weight to flee. But Clara didn't move toward her. Instead, she walked to the opposite corner and began cleaning up manure piles, working in a slow, methodical pattern. She didn't look at Silver, didn't speak, just worked, creating a rhythm with the fork. Scrape, lift, toss. Scrape, lift, toss. She focused on making her breathing audible but calm, timing it with her movements. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Clara's arms ached, but she kept going. She heard Helen settle onto a bench outside the paddock, content to wait. At the 40-minute mark, Clara felt it before she saw it, a shift in the energy of the space. She risked a glance from the corner of her eye and saw that Silver had moved. Not away, but closer. The mare had taken 3 steps toward the center of the paddock, her ears pricked forward with curiosity instead of fear. Clara kept working. Scrape, lift, toss. Breathe. Another 10 minutes, and Silver was 15 feet away. Then 10. Clara could hear the mare's breathing now, could smell the sweet grass scent of her. Finally, Clara set down the fork and sat in the dirt, her back to Silver, making herself as non-threatening as possible. She began to hum, an old lullaby her mother used to sing, tuneless and soft. The mare's shadow fell across her. Clara felt warm breath on her neck. And then, impossibly, Silver's soft nose pressed against her shoulder blade. Helen was standing at the fence now, her expression one of wonder. In 2 weeks, we couldn't get her to come within 20 feet. You did it in an hour. Clara slowly reached up to touch the mare's muzzle, her movements glacial. Silver flinched, but didn't retreat. Progress. I didn't do anything, Clara said. I just stopped being something to be afraid of. That night, in the cabin she shared with Emma and Kai, Clara learned that her viral video had taken on a life of its own. Emma, a college student studying veterinary medicine, had seen it before Clara had even arrived. You're kind of famous, you know, Emma said, brushing out her long black hair before bed. There are think pieces being written about you. Some people are calling you a prodigy. Others are saying you're going to get yourself killed. Kai, a quiet non-binary kid with purple hair and gentle hands, looked up from the book they were reading. My money's on Prodigy. I saw you with Silver today. Helen said she's never seen that mare volunteer contact with anyone before. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's not magic or anything. It's just paying attention. That's the hardest part, though, Kai said. Most people are so focused on what they want from the horse that they never stop to ask what the horse needs. Over the next month, Clara absorbed everything Helen had to teach. The science behind what she'd been doing intuitively. How to read the subtle language of the horse's body. The angle of the ear that indicated focus versus fear. The tension in the muscles that preceded flight. The softening around the eye that meant acceptance. She learned about the polyvagal theory and how trauma affected the nervous system. She discovered that many problem horses weren't defiant. They were simply living in a state of chronic stress, their bodies unable to distinguish between past danger and present safety. Helen taught her about approach and retreat, the technique of creating pressure and then immediately releasing it to reward the slightest try. About the power of doing nothing, of giving a horse space to make choices. About reading the environment and understanding how things like wind direction, the time of day, and even the handler's emotional state could affect a horse's behavior. But most importantly, Helen taught her how to keep herself safe while doing this work. Your viral moment was beautiful, Helen said one evening as they watched the sunset from the barn aisle. But it was also incredibly dangerous. You got lucky that Midnight responded the way he did. Some horses are so deep in their trauma that they'll strike first and never give you the chance to prove you're safe. You need to be able to assess risk, to know when to try and when to walk away. Clara thought of her father's worried face. How do you tell the difference? Experience. And even then, you'll sometimes get it wrong. I've got scars to prove it. Helen pulled up her sleeve to show a jagged line running from wrist to elbow. Young stallion, 5 years ago. I thought I could reach him. Turned out I was wrong. He needed medication and a different approach before he could handle human contact. What happened to him? He's in the back pasture. You'll meet Thunder tomorrow. He's one of our success stories now, but it took 3 years of patient work. Not every horse can be saved in an hour, Clara. Most of them take months or years. The video made it look easy, but what you did with Midnight was just the first step. The real work comes after. That night, Clara lay awake thinking about Midnight, wondering if anyone had taken the time to do the real work with him, or if he was back in that reinforced pen, being used to throw cowboys for entertainment. She pulled out her phone and typed his name into a search bar. What she found made her heart sink. The rodeo contractor had put him up for sale, capitalizing on the viral video. The asking price was $20,000, far more than a bucking horse was usually worth, with the description, famous unkillable bronc as seen on TikTok. Proven crowd pleaser. Has never been successfully ridden. There was a note at the bottom. If not sold by September 1st, will be sent to slaughter. Clara screenshot the listing and sent it to her father with a single word. Please. His response came an hour later. I'll see what I can do. September in Montana was Clara's favorite time of year. The aspens turned gold against the evergreens. The air carried the first bite of autumn, and the summer tourists cleared out, leaving the big sky to the people who actually lived beneath it. She stepped off the bus in town to find her father waiting in his truck, and her mother sitting in the passenger seat with a smile that could have lit up the valley. Welcome home, sweetie, Mary said, pulling Clara into a hug that smelled like vanilla and clean laundry. John grabbed her duffel bag and tossed it in the truck bed. You get taller in Colorado? Dad, it was only a month. Month's a long time. He paused, and Clara saw something shift in his expression. Got something to show you when we get home. The drive to the ranch was filled with Mary's questions about everything. The facility, the other students, the horses, Dr. Moore. Clara answered them all, but her attention kept drifting to her father's hands on the steering wheel, the way his jaw was set in that particular way that meant he was holding back something big. When they turned onto the long dirt drive that led to the Miller Ranch, Clara saw it immediately. A new paddock had been built beside the barn, with reinforced rails and a 3-sided shelter. And standing in that paddock, his coat gleaming like polished onyx in the afternoon sun, was Midnight. Clara was out of the truck before it fully stopped. Dad, how did you? Contractor wanted $20,000, John said, climbing out slowly. I told him that was highway robbery for a horse headed to slaughter. Offered him 5. He countered at 15. We settled on 8. $8,000? Clara's voice cracked. That was more than they'd spent on their last 2 trucks combined. Mary touched her husband's arm gently. He took out a loan against the cattle. And we had some savings. That was for retirement, Clara whispered. Retirement can wait, John said gruffly. Couldn't have that horse going to slaughter. Not after what you showed everyone at the rodeo. Besides, you're going to train him proper, aren't you? Turn him into something useful. Clara approached Midnight's paddock slowly, letting him see her coming. The stallion's head lifted, his ears swiveling toward her. For a moment, she worried he wouldn't remember. It had been more than a month. Then Midnight nickered, a soft, rumbling sound, and walked toward the fence. Clara laughed, a sound halfway between joy and tears. She let him sniff her hand, just like that first time in the rodeo pen, and felt his warm breath against her palm. "Hey boy, remember me?" Behind her, she heard her mother's camera click. Mary Miller documented everything important in their family's life, and apparently this qualified. "I've been feeding him twice a day," John said, staying a respectful distance back. "Kept everyone else away from his paddock like you told me in your emails. He's settled some, but he's still got that edge to him. Still pins his ears when I come too close." Clara studied Midnight with her newly trained eye. He looked better than he had at the rodeo. His coat had a healthy shine, his eyes were brighter, his weight was good. But she could see the tension still carried in his muscles, the way he positioned himself to keep both her and her father in his line of sight. "He's learned that people can be okay," Clara said. "But he hasn't learned to trust yet." "Not really. That's going to take time." "You've got time," John said. "Question is, what are you planning to do with him once he's trained?" Clara turned to look at her father. "I've been thinking about that. A lot, actually." That evening, the family sat around the kitchen table with Clara's laptop open, looking at her proposal. She'd spent the last 2 weeks in Colorado working on it with Helen's help. "The Second Chance Project," Mary read aloud. "A horse rehabilitation and youth mentorship program. The idea is simple," Clara explained, pulling up a slide presentation she'd made. "We use the ranch to take in problem horses, the ones like Midnight who are headed for slaughter because they're deemed too dangerous or difficult. We rehabilitate them using natural horsemanship methods. And while we're doing that, we bring in teenagers from the community who are struggling. Kids who've had run-ins with the law, or who are falling through the cracks at school, or who just need somewhere to belong." John leaned back in his chair. "You want to turn our cattle ranch into a therapy center?" "Not the whole ranch. Just a section." "Dad, think about it. We've got the space. We've got the facilities. And after that video, we've got attention. Dr. Moore said she'd help me write grants. She thinks we could get funding from the state, maybe even federal programs for at-risk youth." "And what do the kids do exactly?" "They work with the horses. They learn the same things I learned. How to read behavior, how to build trust, how to communicate without force. It teaches responsibility, empathy, patience. All the things horses teach naturally, if you let them." Mary was scrolling through the budget Clara had drafted. "This is well thought out, honey, but it's ambitious. Where would these kids come from?" "I've already talked to the county juvenile officer. He's got a dozen kids right now who are doing community service for minor offenses. Instead of picking up trash on the highway, they could work here, learn actual skills." John was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the presentation. Clara held her breath, waiting. Finally, he spoke. "Your mother and I have been talking. That viral video brought a lot of attention to this town. Some good, some bad. But mostly, it showed people something they'd forgotten, that there are different ways to work with animals. Better ways." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I grew up breaking horses the old way. You rope 'em, you saddle 'em, you ride the buck out of them until they quit. That's what my father did, and his father before him. It works most of the time, but it also breaks something in the horse. I never thought much about it until I watched you with Midnight." Mary reached over and squeezed his hand. "What I'm saying is," John continued, his voice rough with emotion, "I think you're onto something. And if you're willing to do the work, I'm willing to help you build it." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Really? Really? But there's a condition. We do this right. That means insurance, liability waivers, proper supervision. I won't have anyone getting hurt on our property because we cut corners." "Understood. Understood." Mary closed the laptop and smiled. "Then I guess we've got a lot of work to do. We'll need to spread the word, get the community on board. Maybe host some kind of demonstration so people can see what this is all about." An idea struck Clara like lightning. "A barbecue, like the old ranch gatherings. We invite everyone, the neighbors, the county officials, the kids who'd be in the program. We show them what natural horsemanship looks like. Show them it's not just for one special horse, but something that works with any horse if you understand the principles." John nodded slowly. "Labor Day weekend. Gives us time to prepare, and everyone will still be around before the kids go back to school." We'll make it a county event. Food, music, and a demonstration. With midnight? Mary asked. Clara looked out the window at the black stallion, who was grazing peacefully in the twilight. With midnight. And maybe a few others, if we can find them. The week before the Labor Day barbecue, Clara barely slept. Word had spread through Big Sky County like wildfire. The girl from the viral video was going to do a live demonstration at her family's ranch, showing the horse whispering techniques that had made her internet famous. The response was mixed. Younger folks, especially those who'd seen the video, were excited. But the old guard, the cowboys who'd been working ranches since before Clara was born, were skeptical at best and hostile at worst. Old man Jeb made his opinion known at the feed store, loud enough for half the town to hear. Girl's gonna get herself killed playing around with the methods. Horse needs to know who's boss, plain and simple. All this touchy-feely nonsense is just city folk ideas brought to the country. But Jeb also RSVP'd that he'd be attending, which Clara took as a good sign. Even skeptics wanted to see the show. 3 days before the event, Clara got a call from a woman named Sarah Chun, who lived on a small property outside of town. I saw the flyer at the feed store, Sarah said, her voice hesitant. About your demonstration. The thing is, I have a horse I don't know what to do with anymore. He's a white gelding named Ghost. I bought him 2 years ago from a man who seemed nice enough, but I found out later he'd been abusing the horse. Ghost won't let anyone touch him. I've tried everything, trainers, vets, even a horse chiropractor. Nothing works. I can't sell him because he's too dangerous, and I can't keep him forever just eating hay in my pasture. I heard they put horses down for less. Clara's heart clenched. Don't do that. Don't even think about it. Bring him to the demonstration. What? No, I couldn't. I'm serious. Bring him. Let me work with him in front of everyone. If I can help him, great. If I can't, at least we tried. Either way, you won't have to make any decisions about putting him down. Not yet. There was a long pause. You do that? In front of all those people? What if it doesn't work? Then it doesn't work. But Sarah, horses like Ghost, they're not broken beyond repair. They just need someone who speaks their language. Let me try. Another pause. Okay, yes. I'll bring him. The morning of September 3rd dawned clear and perfect, the kind of Montana day that made the whole state look like a postcard. John and Mary had been up since 4 a.m., preparing. The ranch hands they'd hired for cattle work had been repurposed to help set up tables for food, hay bales for seating, and a large round pen that John had spent 3 days building in the main pasture. By 10 a.m., trucks started rolling up the drive, families with coolers and folding chairs, teenagers who'd seen the video and wanted to meet Clara in person, county officials in their press shirts and BOLO ties. They're half out of curiosity and half to assess whether this program was worth supporting. And the old cowboys. They arrived in a cluster, men in their 60s and 70s with weathered faces and skeptical eyes. Old man Jeb led the pack, his white mustache twitching as he surveyed the setup. Fancy pen you built there, John, Jeb said, his tone unreadable. Figured we'd do it right, John replied evenly. The barbecue itself was a massive undertaking. 3 whole pigs roasting in pits, countless sides that neighbors had brought, kegs of beer for the adults, and gallons of sweet tea for everyone else. Mary flitted from group to group, playing the perfect hostess, while John maintained the grills with stoic efficiency. Clara stood near Midnight's paddock, trying to calm her nerves. Emma and Kai had driven up from Colorado to support her, and they flanked her now like bodyguards. You've got this, Emma said. I've seen you work. You're the real deal. Kai handed her a water bottle. Stay hydrated. And remember, you're not performing for them. You're communicating with the horse. That's all that matters. At noon, John rang the old dinner bell that hung by the barn, and the crowd began to gather around the round pen. Clara estimated at least 200 people had shown up, maybe more. The weight of all those eyes made her stomach flip. Sarah Chun appeared at her elbow, her face pale. I've got Ghost in the trailer. Are you sure about this? Clara squeezed her hand. I'm sure. Let's give him a few minutes in a holding pen first. Let him settle. They unloaded Ghost into a small paddock adjacent to the round pen. The white gelding was beautiful, a paint horse with blue eyes and a coat like fresh snow. But his beauty was marred by his fear. He stood in the corner of the paddock, his body rigid, his eyes showing white all around the edges. Clara could see old scars on his sides, faded now but still visible. Spur marks and whip lines. Her jaw tightened. John approached with a microphone, a small PA system they'd borrowed from the church. "You want to say a few words first?" Clara took the mic, her hands shaking slightly. The crowd quieted. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice echoing across the pasture. "I know a lot of you are here because you saw a video, and I know some of you think what happened in that video was luck, or tricks, or something fake. I'm here today to show you it's not." She paused, scanning the faces. Some friendly, some neutral, some openly skeptical. "What I do isn't magic. It's not even particularly special. It's just paying attention. Horses have been communicating with us all along. We just haven't been listening. Today, I'm going to work with two horses. The first is Midnight, who you might remember from the rodeo. He's been here for 3 weeks now. The second is Ghost, who I met for the first time 10 minutes ago. He's been abused, and he doesn't trust people." She handed the mic back to her father and stepped toward the gate of the round pen. "First, I'll show you what's possible with time and patience. Then I'll show you that the principles work even with a horse I don't know." John opened the gate to Midnight's paddock. The black stallion stepped into the round pen, his muscles rippling under his coat. He was magnificent, and the crowd murmured in appreciation. Clara entered the pen and closed the gate behind her. For a moment, she just stood there, letting Midnight see her, letting the crowd see that she carried no ropes, no whips, no equipment of any kind. Just her body and her intention. She began to walk, not toward Midnight, but in a wide arc that sent him moving around the perimeter of the pen. This was the foundation, the horse moving, the human directing that movement without force. Clara used her body position and energy to influence Midnight's direction. When he tried to turn inward, she raised her hand slightly, and he corrected course. They moved together in this dance for several minutes, Clara gradually decreasing the pressure, rewarding Midnight's compliance by turning her body away, giving him relief. And then came the magic moment. Midnight lowered his head, his inside ear locked on Clara, and began to lick and chew. "That's the sign," Clara called to the crowd, her voice carrying without the microphone. "When a horse licks and chews, they're processing. They're thinking. It means their nervous system is shifting from stress to calm." She stopped moving and turned her back on Midnight, making herself small and non-threatening. The stallion hesitated only a moment before walking toward her. He pressed his nose against her shoulder blade, just as he'd done that first day in the rodeo pen, but this time it was a choice freely made. Clara turned slowly and stroked his face. Then, to gasps from the crowd, she put a hand on his withers and swung herself up onto his bare back. No saddle, no bridle, just a girl and a horse who'd learned to trust each other. Midnight stood steady as a statue. Clara used only her seat and legs to cue him into a walk, then a trot. They moved around the pen in perfect harmony, demonstrating what was possible when fear was replaced with partnership. Old Man Jeb's voice carried from the crowd. "Well, I'll be damned." Clara slid off Midnight and gave him a final pat before sending him back to his paddock. Now came the hard part. "Ghost has been standing in that pen watching all of this," Clara said, addressing the crowd again. "He's scared right now. His heart is probably racing. He's wondering if I'm going to hurt him like the last human who had control over him. What I'm about to do won't look as impressive as what you just saw. In fact, most of it will look boring. But I want you to watch anyway, because this is where the real work happens." Sarah opened the gate to Ghost's pen, and the white gelding bolted into the round pen like he'd been shot from a cannon. He ran the perimeter at a full gallop, his tail flagged, his eyes wild. Clara didn't try to stop him. She just stood in the center and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Ghost ran himself into exhaustion, his sides heaving, foam flecking his shoulders. Still Clara waited. Finally, the gelding slowed to a trot, then a walk. He was as far from Clara as he could get while still being in the pen, his body pressed against the rails. Clara began to talk, her voice low and steady. Not to the crowd, but to the horse. "I know you're scared. I know someone hurt you. But I'm not that person. I'm not going to hurt you. You don't have to believe me yet. That's okay. We've got time." She took one small step toward him. Ghost's muscles bunched to flee, but Clara immediately stepped back, releasing the pressure. She waited 30 seconds, then tried again. One step forward. Ghost tensed. Clara stepped back. This continued for 20 minutes. The crowd grew restless. Someone coughed. A baby cried. But Clara never broke her focus. Slowly, incrementally, Ghost began to understand. Forward pressure meant nothing bad if it was always followed by retreat. Clara was speaking his language, the language of pressure and release that horses used with each other in the wild. At the 30-minute mark, Clara was able to stand 10 feet from Ghost without him fleeing to the far side of the pen. Progress. She sat down in the dirt, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. And she began to sing. The same lullaby she'd hummed for Silver in Colorado, tuneless and soft. The change in Ghost was subtle but profound. His ears, which had been pinned back in fear, began to swivel. One forward, one back, listening to both Clara and the environment around him. His eyes softened slightly. The tension in his hindquarters eased a fraction. Clara kept singing. At the 45-minute mark, Ghost took a step toward her. Then another. The crowd held its collective breath. The white gelding approached slowly, each step a victory over his fear. When he was 3 feet away, he stopped and extended his neck, his nostrils flaring as he tried to catch her scent. Clara didn't move, didn't reach for him, just sat and sang and let him make the choice. Ghost's nose touched the top of her head, a brief connection that sent a ripple through the crowd. Then he pulled back, processing. Clara stood slowly, her movements glacial. She turned her side to Ghost, not a threat, not a confrontation, just a presence. And she extended her hand, palm down, fingers loose. Ghost stood frozen for an eternal moment. Then, impossibly, he lowered his head and pressed his muzzle into her palm. The crowd erupted. Applause thundered across the pasture. Some people were crying, Sarah loudest among them. Old man Jeb stood and placed his battered cowboy hat over his heart in a gesture of respect. But Clara barely heard them. All her focus was on the white gelding, on the trust blooming between them like a flower in fast forward. She stroked his face, whispered to him, and felt him lean into her touch. When she finally led Ghost out of the pen, still with no halter, no rope, just her hand on his shoulder, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. John took the microphone, his voice thick with emotion. I think we've all seen something special here today. My daughter has shown us that there's another way, a better way. And if y'all are willing, we'd like to make this ranch a place where horses like Midnight and Ghost can come to heel. And where young people in our community can learn what Clara's learned, about patience and trust, and how to build something instead of breaking it. Mary stepped forward with a clipboard. If anyone would like to support the Second Chance Project, we're accepting donations and volunteer applications. We're also looking for horses who need help. If you know of an animal that's been labeled dangerous or untrainable, bring them to us. We'll do what we can. The line to sign up wrapped around the barn. 6 months later, on a cold February morning, Clara stood in the barn aisle watching a 16-year-old boy named Marcus work with a chestnut mare who'd been rescued from a hoarding situation. Marcus had been court-ordered to the Second Chance Project after getting caught stealing cars. He'd shown up angry, defensive, and convinced this was going to be a waste of his time. Now he moved with the mare in the round pen, his body language soft and aware, his energy calibrated to match hers. The transformation wasn't just in the horse, it was in the kid. He's doing well, Helen said, appearing at Clara's elbow. The Colorado trainer had become a regular visitor, driving up once a month to help with the program and to check on her star pupil. Better than well. He got accepted to Montana State University's Animal Science program. Full scholarship. Helen smiled. Because of what he learned here. Because he learned he was capable of something besides destruction. They watched in comfortable silence as Marcus successfully asked the mare to come to him in the center of the pen. His whoop of joy echoed across the ranch. The Second Chance Project had grown beyond anything Clara had imagined. They now had 12 horses in various stages of rehabilitation, and a rotating group of 15 teenagers who came to work with them. Some were court-ordered, like Marcus. Others were simply kids who needed somewhere to belong. Kids struggling in school, kids from broken homes, kids who felt invisible to the world. Working with traumatized horses taught them things no classroom could. It taught them to read subtle cues, to regulate their own emotions, to understand that trust had to be earned. It taught them that broken things could heal, given time and the right environment. The program had attracted attention from across the state. News crews had done features. Child services agencies were sending them referrals. And just last week, A major foundation had awarded them a grant that would allow them to expand the facilities and hire 2 full-time staff members. Midnight had become the program's mascot. His image featured on all their materials. The black stallion who'd been deemed unkillable was now a gentle giant who let the kids groom him and occasionally ride him bareback through the pastures. He'd never forgotten his past. Clara could still see the wariness in his eyes when strangers approached, but he'd learned that not all humans were enemies. Ghost had been officially adopted by Sarah, who'd learned natural horsemanship methods herself and now volunteered at the ranch twice a week. The white gelding still had his moments of fear, but they were growing fewer and farther between. Silver, the gray mare from Colorado, had been transferred to Montana after Helen decided she'd thrive in the program. She was now being worked with by a quiet 14-year-old girl named Rosie who'd been through the foster system 6 times. The connection between the traumatized girl and the traumatized horse was something even Clara couldn't fully explain. It just was. John Miller had become an unexpected convert to natural horsemanship, taking lessons from his daughter and slowly, methodically, changing the way he worked with all their ranch horses. He'd recently given a talk at the Montana Stock Growers Association about updating traditional methods, and while he'd gotten some pushback, he'd also gotten a standing ovation. Mary had become the program's administrator, handling the grants and paperwork and volunteer schedules with the same efficiency she'd once applied to managing the ranch's books. And Clara? Clara was still just a teenager who loved horses. But now she had a purpose that extended beyond herself. Old Man Jeb appeared in the barn doorway, moving slower than he used to, leaning on a cane. "Your daddy around?" "In the office, I think." "Everything okay, Jeb?" The old cowboy shifted his weight. "Got something I need to talk to you both about, actually." They found John at his desk, sorting through feed invoices. At the sight of Jeb, he stood and offered his hand. "What brings you by?" Jeb cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "I've got a horse. 3-year-old filly. Daughter of my best mare. Pretty as a picture, good bloodlines. Problem is, she's turned mean. Won't let me near her. Tries to kick anyone who enters her stall. My grandson says I should send her to auction, but..." He trailed off, his weathered face conflicted. "But you know what happens to mean horses at auction," Clara finished quietly. Jeb nodded. "I've been doing this work for 50 years. Broke more horses than I can count. But I watch what you did at the barbecue, and I've been watching what you're doing here. Maybe," he looked directly at Clara, "maybe my way ain't the only way. Maybe there's something to what you're teaching. Would you take her? Try your methods." Clara felt her father's hand rest gently on her shoulder, a silent show of support and pride. "We'd be honored to work with her," Clara said. "What's her name?" "Haven't named her yet." Seemed pointless to name something headed for slaughter. "Well, that changes today. Bring her by whenever you're ready. We'll find her a name together." After Jeb left, John pulled Clara into a rare hug. "You did good, kid. Got the most stubborn man in the county to admit he might be wrong. That's worth more than all the grants in the world." That evening, after the last volunteer had gone home and the horses were settled for the night, Clara walked out to Midnight's paddock. The black stallion lifted his head from his hay and nickered softly, walking over to greet her. She scratched his favorite spot behind his ear and felt him lean into her touch, his eyes half closed in contentment. It was hard to believe this was the same horse who'd been labeled a killer just 7 months ago. "You started all this, you know," she told him. "That day at the rodeo. You taught me that I could do more than just understand horses. I could help people understand them too." Midnight huffed softly, his breath warm against her neck. Clara thought about Marcus and his mare, about Rosie and Silver, about all the kids and horses who'd found their way to the ranch, about Old Man Jeb's filly who would arrive next week with a chance at a different future. The viral video felt like a lifetime ago, but also like yesterday. She'd been terrified that day, acting on instinct and intuition, not really understanding what she was doing or why it worked. Now she had the knowledge to back up the instinct. She could explain the neuroscience of trauma, the principles of operant conditioning, the importance of reading calming signals. But at its core, what she did was still the same as it had been that day in the rodeo pen. She listened. She paid attention. She met horses where they were instead of demanding they meet her expectations. And somehow, impossibly, it was changing lives. Not just the horses' lives, but the kids' lives and the community's understanding of what was possible when you chose patience over force, partnership over dominance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Helen. Just got off a call with a ranch in Wyoming. They want to start their own version of Second Chance. Asked if you'd be willing to consult. You're building something bigger than Montana, Clara. This is just the beginning. Clara looked up at the big Montana sky, stars beginning to prick through the deepening blue. Midnight stood beside her, solid and warm and transformed. Just the beginning, she whispered, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. The Second Chance project would grow. More horses would be saved. More kids would discover their capacity for gentleness and connection. The old ways of breaking horses would slowly give way to methods that honored the animal's psychology and dignity. And it all started here, in this paddock, with a girl and a so-called killer horse who'd found each other at exactly the right moment. Midnight nudged her shoulder, as if to say, "Time for dinner." Clara laughed and headed toward the barn to grab his evening grain, the black stallion following close at her heels. No ropes, no force, just trust, freely given, earned one quiet moment at a time.